Good evening, everyone. My name is Sarah Corcoran. I'm the Conservation Program Manager for the Pennsylvania chapter of the Sierra Club. And this is our third installment of the Equity in the Outdoors Open Discussion Series. We host these discussions once a month on the second Wednesday of the month and have a different topic that we cover every month. This evening, our lovely chapter outings chair, Amy Kwasnicki, is going to be our facilitator and
Co-chair.
co-chair. Oh, yes, of course, because Meredith, our lovely co-chair, will be our facilitator for this evening. And I will pass it off to you, Amy.
Well, thank you. Sarah is driving this evening, for which I am incredibly grateful. I also want to give a shout out to Callie and Randy, who are going to be helping with various levels of facilitation, especially when we go into the breakout rooms. And of course, I would be lost without Meredith. If you want to go ahead and go to the next slide, Sarah, and again, show the screen, reminding people everyone is entering on mute. There will be times where we invite you to chime in to the large discussion, and then we're also going to be doing some small group work. So you will want to come off mute for any of those things. Similarly, as Sarah already mentioned, we are recording this. If you prefer for your video to not show, feel free to turn off the video. Or if you just need to, turn it off because you need to turn it off, go for it. We will rely on the chat box a bunch. So it's great to see people are using that to say hi and where they're dialing in from this evening. Slide 3, Sarah. So our community agreements, as with the other calls, I know not everyone has been on our calls previously. Some of you are new. Our community agreements are the same for all of these calls. So please think about any jargon you are using. You're welcome to use that jargon, but take a minute to clarify it if you realize it is jargon, or if someone says, what does that mean? Similarly, acronyms can become very tricky. If you use an acronym, take a minute to explain to us what it means, industry language. One mic, again, everyone is entering muted. There are times where we're going to invite you to popcorn, which is to just go ahead and pop in and say something if you'd like to. But if you want to participate in that popcorning conversation, I'm not going to call people out. It would be great if you just say in the chat box that you would like to speak in response to anything you can say on the stack. Please speak from your own experience. This is a discussion. It is not, it's loosely structured. It's okay that things might get a little messy, a little raggedy as we go along. And of course, please acknowledge if something that you said has caused pain. That's where Ooch and Alps comes in. Ooch and Alps, ouch and oops comes in. Sometimes we definitely are going to be getting close to sensitive topics, which is part of why we are having these calls. So I'm sorry, my phone is buzzing and I want to see if it's Meredith or Sarah prompting me, because I've already forgotten to say something, because they will text me in the middle of these calls. Nope, we're good. Okay, awesome. So slide 4, what we've covered so far. In February, we talked about connecting people to the outdoors, and these are some of the responses that came from that conversation. If you were on the call, you may see some of your thoughts represented here. I'm just gonna give you all time to glance through it yourselves versus me reading it out. And I'm gonna drink some water while you do that. Yeah. Hopefully it's kind of familiar. Meredith or Sarah, was there anything in here that you especially wanted to hold up from the February conversation? All right, the next slide is what we pulled out from our March conversation. about safety in the outdoors. Sarah, if you can go ahead to the next slide. The March conversation was about who feels safe in the outdoors and why. And again, here's some of the thoughts that came out of that, some of the sharing. Oh, and that's what we're up to for tonight. So we're going to use the chat box first, I think, for this next one. Huh, that's not the slide I thought it was. What's slide 7? Oh, you animated it. Or did I animate it? Sorry, tech tools. Okay, so if you can please all use your chat box and just throw out there whatever comes to mind when you look at these 3 prompts. Identity is, being inclusive means, we make assumptions about. And I am going to try and reorganize my screen so I can see your responses. Meredith, can you help with looking through any responses? Identity is restrictive. Being inclusive means to include. Identity is a sense of self, self-awareness. We make assumptions about just about everything. Identity is who you think you are. Identity is how you see yourself, who I may be within a group that I am in the presence of. Identity, yeah. Being inclusive means being aware of other people's identity. Identity informs our actions, assumptions, and worldview. We make assumptions about other people's happiness. Lots of thoughts. This is great. Keep it coming. Does anyone have any more thoughts about what being inclusive means, not just to you, but to other people or for other people? Would anyone like to speak about any of this? Or do you want to just keep using the chat? And again, if anyone wants to speak, just put stack in the chat and we can call on you. Being inclusive means accepting others without judgment of their own identity. I'm sorry, Beth, I'm not sure I understand. Being inclusive means, is it accessible? Accessible, okay, thank you. We make assumptions based on our identity and lived experiences. We need to be mindful of how bias informs our assumptions. And what do we make assumptions about? Does anyone have thoughts about that? Cool. Oh, there we go. Assumptions about everything. Assumptions are usually made based off of outward appearances, what others may want. Well, that's fine, Sarah. You can go ahead and move to the next slide. We're going to go ahead and move on to the next thing. Thank you so much for all of the responses in the chat. I really have to say this is just so incredibly awkward and weird to me to not hear all your voices. But it's what we're living in right now, right? So slide 6 is your art project for the evening. This was also emailed out. It's completely fine if you don't have a print copy of this, because all you need is a pen and a piece of paper. What we are going to be doing, Sarah, the amazing tech guru, is going to be actually pairing you up in your own breakout session with just one other person, and you are going to do this this sheet. So I think, yeah, okay. I'm going to go ahead and just explain what you're going to be doing. If anyone needs to grab a pen or paper, though, while I'm talking, now is a good time to do that, because once you go into your breakout rooms, Sarah's going to be running the clock. You're going to have 5 minutes to do the first part of the exercise, and then about another 5 minutes to do the second part. Once you get sent into your breakout sessions, Sarah and I are going to keep an eye on the time, so we will remind you when you need to go to each step of this exercise. But when the time is done, you're just going to get yanked back into the main room. So that can be a little shocking. Just prepare yourselves now, especially if you're in the middle of a conversation, which we hope you will be. What you're going to be doing with this is in the circle that says name, you're going to be putting your name. You can have as many radials off of that main circle that is your name as you want. I know this illustration makes it looks like you can only do so many, but what you're going to be exploring is how you identify yourself, and that can be as much as you need it to be. You're going to be using whatever identifiers or descriptors feel important to you when you are defining yourself. It can be race, nationality, gender, profession, religion, that you're an outdoors person, a hiker, a beginning climber, any description, any descriptor that you identify with. You're going to have 5 minutes. So we're going to pair you up, but then you're going to sit there for 5 minutes working on your sheets. You can introduce yourselves to each other, though, of course. And then after that 5 minutes, we want you to imagine that you've signed up for a Sierra Club hike in Frick Park, let's say, which is in Pittsburgh. When you get there, you notice immediately that you're the only person there with identities like yours. And then each of you are going to take 2 minutes to talk to your buddy in your breakout room about how it feels to be the only person there with your identities. Person 1 is going to speak for 2 minutes. Person 2 is just going to listen, and then you are going to reverse your roles. So again, we're going to give you 5 minutes to work on the sheet. There will be a little screen that pops up on your breakout room that reminds you of the scenario and that it's time to take turns sharing with each other. And then we will also remind you when the 2 minutes is up. So does anyone have any quick questions about that process? I believe there's also a way that you can reach out to us while you're in your breakout room to let us know if you need help. Is that right, Sarah?
Yes. So once you get into the breakout room, there'll be an option that you can call a host into your room, and I can come and talk to you if you have any confusion or anything. I did see that there was a comment in the chat. You're doing this activity based on your own identities, so not your partner's. And we do have one group of 3. So we will have a little bit of extra time. I'm going to give Justin a little bit extra so that way everybody in that group has a chance to discuss. And we will be putting you into the breakout rooms, and you can do the activity in the breakout room. So you don't have to start working on it until you get there if you don't want to. And I will let y'all know when it's time to come back.
Welcome back. We hope you had an interesting experience and maybe enjoyed getting to know each other a little bit more as well. If anyone is willing, it would be great to go ahead and pop in the chat, especially anything that surprised you about yourself in the course of doing the identity exercise. And if you don't want to share, that's totally fine, of course. And if anyone would actually like to verbally share, that would be great. It would be great if we could hear from 2 or 3 people about what they thought about that exercise. Again, anything that they learned from it or was surprised about. Again, just if you would just put in the chat that you would like to be on the stack. Oh, Ashley, great. I think you can unmute yourself, or yeah, you can unmute yourself.
Cool. Hi, I'm Ashley. I'm from Pittsburgh. And something I found myself saying was that I've never really been the minority in a group whenever we were kind of discussing that part of it. Then I just realized like I've actually been a pretty large part of a minority group in certain settings in my life. And I think my outgoing side just kind of like takes over and I find some way to communicate with people in those moments, but not everybody has that ability. So made me think a little more about like, I assume because I am not a minority that I've never been in those positions, but truthfully I have. And it was interesting to think about those times that I have been.
Oh, wow, yeah.
And basically my experience with that is I was a female in the military and I was a mechanic. And so when I showed up for my first day of military training at school, it's called AIT. And, there are 60 women to 800 men standing there. And we have one hallway of barracks and they have an entire building above us. So little intimidating. There were only 2 female drill instructors, so that was interesting. And there were lots of men around. And I'm really comfortable in that setting, but I can tell that a lot of people weren't. And I basically just was like the person that always like stuck up for people if they needed it and like, hey, don't say that, like that was rude, or how do you know that, or whatever it is. But I find myself kind of often taking those roles and just kind of being like the conversation starter and trying to include people that look like they might be uncomfortable.
That's awesome. Yeah, thank you for sharing. Did anyone else have anything that they'd like to share from doing that exercise? Yeah, and definitely, thank you, Sarah. Yeah, feel free to put it in the chat if you don't necessarily want to speak. That's totally fine. And if everyone's good, we'll move on to the next thing. Oh, okay, Beth, yeah, please, you can just unmute yourself.
Okay. Yeah, the one thing I wanted to share is I think, and I said this to the person I was working with, Grace, I don't give myself labels that much. So I was having a little bit of trouble identifying myself, even though I know who I am. But when I was starting to generate them, I also thought of labels other people give me and how they identify me, because sometimes I can tell I'm being identified in a way that doesn't work with who I am.
Mhm.
And I just thought that that was an interesting exercise. I'm sure I've done these kinds of exercises before and probably came up with lots of identifiers, but this one was for some reason caught me off guard. And the other thing is, just based on what Ashley was talking about, I was a minority growing up. I was as a young person growing up, and I know what it feels like to be a minority. And at that time, it's been a long time. And I find that interesting too. I've been thinking about that for many years while things have been going on in this world lately. So that's it.
Wow, thank you for sharing. That's awesome. That's really fascinating. I'm so tempted to ask more, but is there anyone else that wanted to share something? I'm trying to be a good facilitator versus just being Amy, and Amy just always wants to have conversations with everyone, which I know is not my role this evening. So, all right, let's go ahead and go to the next slide, Sarah. Thank you. And thanks everyone for participating. It's always a big deal to be vulnerable to other people, even if it's just saying hi to someone you don't know.
I think I have something to add, which is,
Okay.
so I grew up in New York City, and it's a majority, or it's not actually majority Jewish, but in where I lived, it was like kind of a mixed neighborhood. Completely, it was near Columbia University, and it was diverse, and it wasn't really until I came to live in Pennsylvania that I realized that I was really different, because where I grew up, everybody was kind of accepting, and there were, you know, divisions, and they were more class and educational than racial, at least as far as I could tell. And so, you know, it was kind of when I came here, and I'd say things that I'd assume, like I was a volunteer for Planned Parenthood, and I assumed that everybody was cool with that. And I sort of slowly dawned on me that a lot of people think Planned Parenthood works for the devil, you know, and stuff like that. And so that was kind of coming late to being and still looking, you know. That's the other weird thing, is like, I'm white, so I pass. And the whole idea of passing is something that I find kind of interesting, quote unquote. I've put passing in quotes. I don't think it's, you know, of any value, but it is a thing that it gives a person a little insight, because if you look like everybody thinks everybody else looks, but you don't feel like you look like that, then it complicates things. I think I'll mute myself again. I'm kind of babbling, but yeah.
Identity is complicated. I spent a while going through many different definitions for identity, and what I put up on the screen is what I said, what the best thing I could find. The qualities, beliefs, personality, looks, and or expressions that make a person or a group. What Marxist is the same versus different from others. It can be whatever makes an entity definable and recognizable over time. And there are multiple identity definitions. So I think this experience was a lot about personal identity, but there's also social identity, group expression and affiliation, racial, ethnocultural. Being inclusive means the act of creating environments in which any individual group can be and feel welcome, respected, supported, and valued to fully participate. That is the official Sierra Club definition for inclusion, being inclusive. And then we get to assumptions, which I think is where we start. We've all been kind of tripped up by assumptions in life. I think it's pretty safe to say that without assuming too much about everyone. Assumptions, at its most basic definition, a thing that is accepted as true or is certain to happen without proof. We prove our assumptions through associations and bias. Is it possible to operate without assumptions? And I saw this popping up in the chat earlier, like, can we operate without assuming? Sarah, can you go to the next? So this is just a thought experiment. And definitely, if it triggers any responses, again, feel free to put them in the chat. If you really would like to speak to something, if you can just put in the chat that you want to be on the stack, that'd be great. This is exactly what it says at the top, a thought experiment in associations, like what we map together in our minds, frequently based on our experiences, which in turn overlaps with bias. Who is a hero? Who is a villain? Assertive versus aggressive? How are victims depicted? How are thugs depicted? And to our topic as Sierra Club members and supporters, who is a hiker? Who is a non-hiker? Who belongs outdoors and who does not belong outdoors? We have a few minutes before we go into the next breakout. Again, if there's any responses to that, if any of it surprised, if you found yourself immediately having an assumption in your mind that you'd like to share when you even just look at the terms and quotes. And yeah, Sarah, thank you. We do have extra time. So this conversation is going to go a little bit past 8 o'clock. We know that people may need to leave promptly at 8, and that's completely fine. But we are also happy to stay on a little bit later tonight and keep talking with anyone who wants to keep talking. All right. So we're going to do breakouts again. This time in larger rooms, and each room will have a facilitator. Me, Meredith, Callie, or Randy will be in your room with you. And yeah, I think unless there were other questions or anything, it's the same kind of process. Sarah's going to send us off to our rooms, and then she's going to pull us back again in about 15 minutes, Sarah? Okay, so see everybody in your breakout rooms. I hope that everyone had as invigorating a set of conversation as we did in the group I was in. Wow, what did everyone talk about? Yeah, let's see. Does anyone, I know we keep relying on the chat a lot, but does anyone want to like report back on their small group? If so, again, you can put it in the chat and that you'd like to say something. And then I think we're also going to maybe, yeah, let's go ahead and also pop up the Post-its, the next slide. Sorry, I lost my place in the chat if someone asked to speak. Ashley will always talk. I love it. Ashley, go for it.
The Post-its are awesome. So if there was like more to do with this and some folks have to leave, I can talk after.
I was just thinking people could also put stuff in the Post-its. They can put stuff in the chat. They can talk.
Yeah.
All of it. I want all the feedback.
We had a super productive conversation. I think we made it as far as like the drum circle scenario, and like I had like the point of view of like, well, if people have kids, like maybe that's something we should talk to them about earlier in the day. And, you know, kind of like, are there quiet hours at this place? Are there not quiet hours posted? Like that kind of take on it, because I always work with kids and families. So like, there's always a parent that can get kind of uppity. So you want to like try to mitigate your possibilities. But then Brooklyn brought up a really great point that like, this is everyone's outdoors and we're all supposed to be having our best experiences. So also like to kind of, you know, let that be exactly what it is for everyone, and see if, you know, like maybe we can also have our group like enjoy what's happening around us too, rather than trying to mitigate every little scenario that can come out of that. So I thought it was interesting to hear that point of view, because like that wasn't one that I would typically consider, simply because I'm always working with kids and cranky kids are not my favorite thing. So but you know what, the kids might be so energized by the situation, like I'm not taking into consideration that some of those kids probably way overslept on their drive to wherever we're hiking that day. So who knows? You know, it's just one of those things that they may take away so much more out of meeting different people in a drum circle, and like the idea that they had this whole new experience due to us being in the same place, that there's no reason to try to like always take other steps.
Right.
I thought it was interesting, and like so many good points of view. Our group was really communicative. So
yeah, I feel like the time flew by in our group. I should also add, because I was told it was important that I share this with everyone. All of those scenarios are from my life. Those are all things I've experienced as a part of either doing outdoor leadership or being a participant in the outdoors. So I didn't make any of them up. Sure, I did layer some things in, like the kids having the rave party was not the same camping trip as the drum circle. but it's all happened.
I laugh because I've probably been in all of those scenarios.
I know. Okay, thanks, Grace. Thanks for joining us. Yeah, it is 8 o'clock. I don't want to I really would love it if people can throw in any other thoughts that they have into the chat, because then we can also put it into the post-its for you. But I do want to real quick just go through one more thing real quick and then officially release everybody. We do have an optional video, but part of the reason that we've been having these conversations is we do have a situation in Pennsylvania that we're hoping we can get volunteers to help us with. Sarah, can you go to the next slide? Since we've been talking about identity and inclusion and assumption, here's, and I know there's problems with the census, but we're not going to go into those right now. That was the best place I could find for some information, just some basic number information about the state of Pennsylvania. And everyone can see for yourselves how people in Pennsylvania tend to identify in terms of race and what those numbers end up looking like. If we can go to the next slide, Sarah. This is a state map, obviously. And then all the cute little green trees are the state parks and forests of Pennsylvania, the official public land holdings of the Department of Conservation and Natural Resources, our state park system. The next slide. These are the 2020 election results. And I know that like not everyone who identifies as a Republican is a Trump supporter. And I know that not everyone who identifies as a Trump supporter is a Republican. And I know that we want to be having inclusive conversations as Sierra Club Pennsylvania, where everyone is invited to the table to feel welcome and safe. But I think we can all kind of assume from these conversations that we've been having that at this point, if there are folks who are supporting the Republican platform under Trump, a lot of the rest of us are definitely feeling like we are dealing with white supremacists, bigots, prejudice, hatred, and other things that we are really not okay with. Next slide, please, Sarah. This is our state parks overlapped with the election results, and you can see that the majority of our state park and forest holdings are in counties that significantly voted Republican, supported Trump in the 2020 election. And we really feel as Sierra Club Pennsylvania that we need to have some conversations with our neighbors throughout Pennsylvania, because those of us who are living in a blue county, for example, are not necessarily going to feel comfortable leading a hike in one of those deep purple counties, but those are our state parks. They are our state forests. They are supposed to be welcoming and safe for everybody. So Sarah and Meredith and I have been trying to figure out how to do some kind of county by county conversation campaign. We don't even know what to call it, where we figure out what is the best way to solve this schism so that we can confidently say that our state parks everywhere in Pennsylvania are really safe and welcoming, and not just when you're in the park, but when you stop to get gas on the way there, when you go to buy firewood. And we are looking for y'all who are on these calls with us to let us know if you are in one of those counties, or if you have family in one of those counties, you grew up in one of those counties, you visit one of those counties a lot, and you might be interested in helping us connect to the stakeholders on the ground who would also feel concerned about, for example, wanting people to come and recreate and spend money in their county, and wanting to make sure that everyone feels confident and safe and happy about doing that. So that is that's what we, go ahead and get the next slide, Sarah. I forgot the next slide. That's what we are going to do about it. What is Pennsylvania Sierra Club doing about this? And we are so glad you asked, because we need your help to figure out exactly what it is we are going to do. So y'all get the follow-up emails from these calls. Definitely reach out to us. Again, put stuff in the chat if you want. And if you want to linger a little bit longer this